धीरं कृतकृत्यं चडुलं स्फुटतर निपुणं कर्मम् പാടാമേ നാടിൻ കാവൽ സംഗീതം നേടാം നന്മതൻ സ്നേഹം സന്തോഷം തേടാമെന്നെന്നും ശാന്തിയും സന്ദേശം ചേരാം നേരിന്റെ ലോകം കണ്ടെത്താൻ സത്യം പാലിക്കാൻ നിത്യം രക്ഷിക്കാൻ നിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ മൃദുഭാവം ദൃഢകൃത്യം ഇത് സേന നമ്മുടെ സേന കഠിനം ചലനം മൃദുമൃദുരം പ്രിയവചനം
ഞങ്ങൾക്കും നിങ്ങളാശ്രയം എന്നെന്നും നൽകും സാന്ത്വനം വഴികാട്ടുവാൻ ജനമൈത്രിയായി
കയ്യെത്തും ദൂരത്തെ സേന എന്നെഞ്ചിൻ കാവൽ രക്ഷാനിരതം ഭയഭയരഹിതം ധീരം കൃതകൃത്യം ചടുലം സ്ഫുടതര നിപുണം കർമ്മം അതിശക്താനിപുണം സ്വയം നിജഹൃദയം കഠിനം ചലനം മൃദുമൃദുരം പ്രിയവചനം രക്ഷാനിരതം ഭയഭയരഹിതം ധീരം കൃതകൃത്യം ചടുലം സ്ഫുടതര നിപുണം കർമ്മം നമ്മുടെ സേന.
Hello and welcome to everyone tuning in from around the world. I am Majumdar, a member of the organizing team here at HackPi 2021. We are extremely proud to bring forth the 5th edition of Hackathon, HackPi 2021. Unlike previous years, this time around, HackPi is not just a competition to find winners. In this edition, our mission is to create a single eminent solution with the help of participants and mentors to tackle one of the most pressing challenges in the world of cybersecurity today, which is demystifying the dark web. Let me take this opportunity to thank our strong pillars of support. We have Beagle Security as our technology partner, Cloud4C as our cloud partner, Mashup Stack as our knowledge partner, Ecoloop 360 as our sustainability partner, and Federal Bank and ICICI as our banking partners. Our community partners include ICMEC, OWASP, WSIS India Affiliate, ASRG, ISACA Trivandrum Chapter, Nulcon, GTech ATFG, and AWS UG Kochi. We would also like to thank our partners BSafe and Recon. This event wouldn't have been possible without your strong backing. Thank you all for the support shown in organizing HackPi. Today, we have our 5th live tech talk on the topic threat hunting with open source tools. And we are extremely delighted to have with us Mr. Dhruv Majumdar, Senior Manager, Cyber Threat Management at Ernst & Young, Canada. He has around 7 years of experience spread across a wide range of domains, including MDR IT, OT, Big Data Engineering, ML, OSINT, CTI breach response, attack simulation. He has a keen interest in helping companies understand cyber threats and how to protect against it. Before I hand over to Mr. Dhruv Majumdar, I would like to let the audience know that they can drop in their queries in the comment section on Hackpea's Facebook and YouTube channels. He'll respond to your queries at the end of the session. It is with great enthusiasm that I invite Mr. Dhruv Majumdar to shine some light on the topic, threat hunting with open source tools, for the 5th session in this Tech Talk series. Mr. Dhruv, I hand over the mic to you. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. So thank you for having me, first of all, Hackpea. To everyone who is watching, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from all around the world. Hopefully this is going to be an exciting presentation. The plan of the presentation is to demonstrate what you can find openly available out in the market that you can use to your benefit for monitoring and providing the monitoring service to your clients, or even monitoring if you work for a company, providing a threat hunting solution to your environment. So that's why the name of the presentation is Threat Hunting with Open Source Tools. As the introduction said, so the agenda of the whole presentation will be to cover who am I, what is threat hunting, MITRE attack, and enterprise kill chain, TTP as a flow, cyber threat hunting. I'm going to cover what is called the BIOC. I don't really know if the name's going to catch up yet, but what I mean by that is I'm not talking about IPs and just domain names. I'm talking about behaviors of IOCs. And the sliding scale of cybersecurity after that, assume the breach model, which is the mentality a cyber threat hunter should have. What is required to do this successfully? Hopefully there is enough time that I can give you guys a small demo of how all the platforms works together. And that's going to be a small demo session. After that, some reference topics where you guys can pick the topics up and start doing it yourself in your home lab, wherever you feel fit. Conclusion and the problems the industry still has and still suffering from. At the same time, the floor will be opened up to you guys for question and answers. So yeah, who am I? Really quickly, my name, as I mentioned, it's Dhruv Majumdar. I'm a senior manager at the Canadian Ernst & Young branch out of Toronto. I am part of the CTM team, which is the cyber threat management. Now, what comes with cyber threat management is red team, purple team, and MDR and vulnerability management. And none of this would be possible without cyber threat intelligence. So cyber threat intelligence kind of sits at the core of all these other services, which I am part of. My career, I've been blessed with working with some of the really big names in the world. That only means is my platform was opened up to big data, critical problems that are with scaling and issues that a small company would not even see, but a big organization, when you have 500,000 workers working for you and you have to do monitoring, how do you solve that problem? And as I mentioned, my career at the early stage got started out with big companies where I had to face the problem and come up with solutions. As a speaker, I've done multiple, speaking conferences and attended a lot, way more than I've done myself. And that's purely because I love learning. I think I need to learn on a daily basis, and I also need to help others learn at a fast speed. And that's why I decided to do this presentation as well. As far as hobbies are concerned, I love doing photography. I love doing bird watching, nature, fashion, birds, you name it. I probably like doing it. And yeah, drones an interesting topic as well. I use drones for videography as well as a little bit of photography. I also use drones for a lot of hacking as well as a lot of recon activity whenever needed. So let's start with threat hunting basics, right? Threat hunting, as maybe the pronoun is or the verb is defined in Wikipedia, will be proactively and iteratively searching through environments to detect and isolate a threat that evades existing security solutions. Now, security solutions can be an antivirus, your IPS and IDS technologies that you have in place. Sorry, forgot to mute my phone. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's what the definition of threat hunting means. But really what it stands out to be is threat hunting is actually a process. The process is a multiple layered process. The threat hunters are the ones who carry out the process. And the threat hunting is not really a one man's job. It's a team effort end of the day. And the action that you guys perform is the hunt. Now we're going to come back to that, and we're going to talk a little bit about the process and the hunt itself. But before we go, I don't know if you can visualize the small life cycle that I have in the very lower corner. What it basically means is, I'm going to make it short and actually help you guys understand that in a real quick speed. The concept is actually derived from something called F3EAD. What it means is find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, and disseminate. And in layman's term, what it ends up meaning is your job is to find a problem, fix the problem, finish the task completely end to end. Then when you have done that remediation step, it's time for exploit. And exploit basically means you reverse engineer the malware, or you dug deeper into what it was trying to do and all that. And you analyze as much as you can. And then you obviously disseminate, which is sharing that information with your company, with your peers, with companies that you work closely with, or with threat intel sources that you work closely with. And as well, you feed that data back into your IPS and IDS solution as a proactive approach, so that you can now be prepared that if the same attack happens again, at least your defenses will be blocking the C2s or the known hashes at this point. Taking to the MITRE attack and the enterprise kill chain, I think this is where the core of threat hunting lies. The better you understand MITRE heat map, the better you understand enterprise kill chain and how it works, the better threat hunter or a security researcher you will become. And the reason is pretty simple. The reason is MITRE did a really phenomenal job over the years of mapping TTPs with T codes and aligning them with the different phases that happens inside an enterprise kill chain. Now on my screen, I don't really know if this is very clear to everyone, but on my screen, you will see like the phases are broken down into multiple parts, which is starting from initial access, execution, persistence, privilege, defense evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control, exfiltration, impact. Now, why is this important? Now, in the recent times, if you guys look at the news, you will see a lot of companies, everyone is talking about ransomwares, right? Now, if you map ransomware, the act of the ransomware, it falls at the very end, which is the impact. So that tells me that there is a bigger problem than ransomware. You missed the first complete 9 to 10 steps. You did not detect anything out of the ordinary. And the evidence that the impact that happened, well, obviously it's bound to happen. So the problem is not the ransomware. The problem is your detection capabilities are not matured enough to detect and remediate the threat before it becomes a ransomware or any other problem that might be. So taking a deeper look into this, let's go into the TTP as a flow. So I have broken down the MITRE attack into a kill chain format to better explain this to the audience, basically. So if you see, once the attacker gets a foothold on the machine, which is the initial access, after that, there's a multiple things that they can try. And why the trying is important versus detection and monitoring is important, I will go through that as I go through the kill chain. Now, if you see, the very first initial access did happen based on a drive-by download. That was using a signed binary, which is a signed binary proxy execution. Now, what in layman's term it means again is someone was browsing the internet and probably downloaded something that they thought is an important document for them to go poke around or use, and ended up, detonating a malware, so-called. And the malware is wrapped into a binary that is already signed by Microsoft, signed by some other validated companies. So the signature of that particular malware is, will be in the whitelist because it's already signed by someone else that's trusted. So it's a very easy way of evading defenses. Obviously, there are thousands of other ways of evading defenses, but that's how the initial access was done. Right after that, the attacker tried PowerShell. And PowerShell, let's just say, is very well monitored and protected in your environment. Maybe you have really good controls. So the attacker couldn't really do much with the PowerShell, with PowerShell itself. So then they started using unmanaged PowerShell. They leverage bits job, which is the bits binary that Windows would use. So it's part of the log bin, which is living off the land as well. Again, a very good way of detecting and evading defense systems. And then persistence. They moved to persistence in multiple ways. Tried doing, modify registry, creating a scheduled task, DLO sideloading, and then creating a service on the endpoint. After that, or while these two phases kind of go parallelly at the same time, the privilege escalation phase, they attempted to gain privilege via access token manipulation or impersonation, process injection in the user level, and process injection at a privileged user level. From there, again, the defense evasion is pretty much similar to what we just explained during the execution time. The reason why the defense were evaded, again, unmanaged PowerShell and signed binaries. So, and then they tried doing credential access, which you can do with LSAS dumping directly on the memory, directly onto another shared drive for all you care somewhere else to avoid detection, purely running Mimikatz in general on the memory, and so on and so forth. There's so many other tools out there. After that, there is the immense verbose phase of discovery. This is the phase that an attacker would typically use to identify the host, the user, what level of access the user has, what other users are available on that particular machine. If there is a local admin present on that machine, then they move into domain and they try to scrape whatever useful information that they can find, like who's your nearest trust relation domain, what MS-SQL servers are available, work groups, domain groups, carbon roastable items, and so on. There's just so many things to discover. And then what they did, once they did the discovery, they put everything into a zip file and they encrypted the file and then exfiltrated the data. For lateral movement, they leveraged PSExec to move laterally from one machine to another. Again, and all you have to do is PSExec to another machine. You set up a service, and the service is now your new beachhead on another machine. After that, obviously, the command and control sections, the attackers leverage two kinds of frameworks to typically drop other loaders or payloads and keep persistence with another C2. After that, at the end of, once they were done with all their objectives, the impact stage, they basically detonated a ransomware, and that's pretty much the end. So why did I explain all of these in so much details to all of the viewers? The reason is very simple. All the ones that I just mentioned so far before the impact happened could and should be monitored at the least. And by monitoring, I'm not mentioning about just logging those items, because that's number one. That's where you get started. Once you have visibility, you start the monitoring process. Once you have monitoring capabilities, you start writing detections, and you start identifying which one is criticality 1, which one is a high severity, which one is a low severity, and you move on. And over time, you will see that in your kill chain phases, in the previous slide, over here, as you move on, you will see a lot of the things will turn green, which is good. And a lot of things will slowly start turning yellow, which is you are improving. And the focus area should be the ones that are still red. And you should always think about how you can detect those and write use cases on those particular topics. And that is the job of a threat hunter. You build up hypothesis, and then you work towards that hypothesis, and then you document the process and you share that information with the bigger team. And over time, that process improves and the documentation becomes rock solid, so that it becomes a playbook. Someone can just pick it up, start doing that investigation. And there will be a time where you can come to a conclusion saying, okay, this no longer needs to become a hunt. The documentation is so good that we can actually make this into a use case, and we can directly just alert based on any item that stands out as suspicious. Cyber threat intelligence and the BIOC part that I was talking about. So what is it all about? So I have few examples in this particular presentation that I want to share, but know this, that it's about your thought process. It's not about what I show you on the screen today. And what I mean by that is there's only a handful of examples that I'm sharing with you right now, but this goes beyond the scope of even a 1 day's worth of training, where you need to understand how different binaries work, what is normal to them, what is normal in your environment. if your machine was not infected in the first place, and if you monitored that particular machine with a normal, regular user activity, what is the good that it looks like? And the moment it changes, I'm not talking about bad anymore at this point. The moment there's a shift from good to something else, that is suspicion. And suspicion gives rise to anomaly. Anomaly should be investigated. Now you use machine learning, you use modern techniques, you use Python, use microservices to detect all of that is up to you. But how you detect that, we're gonna cover a few of those, but that doesn't mean that's the limitation. That only means that's your starting point. There is just so much that you can do after that as well. So on the left-hand side of the screen, if you draw a diagonal from the screen, left to right, you will see that the DGA, DNS, and the HTTPS are based on network. The PowerShell downgrade, the Reserve, and the unmanaged PowerShell are part of your endpoints. So what is DGA? DGA is domain generated algorithm. Typically, you will see DGAs being leveraged with typical ransomware groups, not limited to ransomware groups, but the overview and the average threat actors that leverage DGA in the past or even now will be related to ransomware groups. The detection of a DGA is actually fairly simple, even though people might think, oh, it's complicated, but as long as you are monitoring your DNS events, the DNS queries and the DNS answers, and the entire DNS protocol, and your DNS is obviously not encrypted end to end, then you cannot do that. So, but making sure that your DNS is able to be monitored and you are collecting all that logs, you should be fairly simplistic way you can write a query where all you have to do is calculate the queries based on entropy. Now, entropies can vary based on, there are lots of different kinds of entropy. You can come up with your own entropy for all it matters. The one that I have on the screen is basically leveraging Shannon entropy. What it does, it looks for how far is the frequency of separation of the word being used in that particular query that is out of the normal, which is out of the non-used English dictionary words. And based on that, it scores the query. Now, the more the score, the farther separation or the farther frequency separation it happens. Now, obviously, there are other tools. There is literally a tool called Frequency Pi, really great tool which can also do this in a better way or in a different way, but come to the same conclusion, which is, hey, these domains look weird and they are happening. Now you can map the beacon pattern, you can map how the query is happening. Is there a proper interval? Is there randomness, or is it happening in blobs, like 15 queries in 1 second and then it stops? These behaviors are up to you and your detection capabilities. But end of the day, what happens is when the score is high based on the entropy count, those become your outliers, and these outliers needs to be investigated. And the same thing can be put down into HTTP, where HTTP you are looking at the host name. You can also put this into server name when it comes to SSL. Now with SSL, obviously there are other things that a lot of people pretty much comes and asks me, hey Dhruv, SSL is already encrypted. What am I going to get from that? Well, there are a lot of technologies that are improving on a daily basis. Actually, there are quite a few amazing technologies that already exist, like JA3 and JA3S, like JARM. And with these are fingerprinting technologies that you can fingerprint the server and the client's handshake, how it happens. And each and every C2, like MetaPredator, or if you are leveraging Cobalt Strike, if you're leveraging Silent Trinity, if you're leveraging POS C2, any of these, they will have a unique fingerprint when the client talks to the server and there is a complete handshake. And that can be fingerprinted. And that's part of your research. Now, once you have documented all of these, now you can use these fingerprint mechanisms to actually write a detection on your environment that whenever these two happen, you put an event out and someone needs to go investigate. Over time, you will come across some false positives, and the false positive needs to be suppressed. But suppression also is a very, very important part of your cyber threat intelligence model, because unless you have a very good grasp of what is the suppression that you are doing, your suppression can cause an havoc and you will start missing really important data points. Going to the host-based side, let's start from PowerShell downgrade attack. Now, a lot of the time, your Windows 10 typically will have PowerShell 5 running on it. But attackers, or even you can go and downgrade the PowerShell to evade certain things. Like PowerShell 5 by default will have transcript logging, will have script blocks, and all that logging you can now monitor for better detection capabilities. But if the attacker comes in and they downgrade it to PowerShell 1 or PowerShell 2, now you will start. Now they're starting to avoid your detection because there is no monitoring happening on that particular script that they're going to run now, or particular liners that they're going to run now, or commands. So, but before that even happens, you should be able to detect that, okay, someone just downgraded the PowerShell on a particular agent, and then go investigate what was happening before that action happened and what is happening after that action has happened on that machine. Similar concepts to Restructuring, which is part of the log bins, again, living off the land binaries. Log bins, so log bins, all of them are supposed to do some tasks by Windows, and that's why they exist. And they're not supposed to do certain things. So again, detecting on log binaries or log bins actually are fairly simple. Once you understand what these binaries are supposed to do, then all things that are happening that they're not supposed to do becomes an anomaly. Now, I only have one example on my screen where I'm actually sharing with you guys that, hey, redserve is used for downloading and a COM object and then exploiting or exploiting it, leveraging HTTP or HTTPS or FTP, any of the protocols. Redserve being called from PowerShell. Now, these are all outliers. They are not normally observed in an environment. And the moment it happens, you start diving in and you start investigating it as to why it's happening. Now, that might be due to some application trying to do something, which is probably will go back to your suppression list, or it is a threat actor and they're trying to do something bad. Unmanaged PowerShell, one of probably the most commonly used toolsets now that it's part of the Cobalt Strike team. So attackers will literally bypass the PowerShell.exe that exists, because PowerShell.exe is not really PowerShell. It's just a wrapper that enables user to interact with PowerShell core of Windows. So even if you block PowerShell, attackers can very easily leverage unmanaged PowerShell to do what they need to do. And there are certain ways of detecting that as well. Now, one of that detection that I've mentioned over here at the very bottom, system management automation ni.dll. Now, you can monitor this particular DLO, and you will actually see in a good environment, this is probably being used by 2 or 3 processes. That includes sysdiag and PowerShell and so on. And once you suppress those, anytime another process is leveraging any of these DLOs, that should be a big no-no. And then you go start investigating why that happened and then finding what can be done. So there can be an outcome that is, okay, there is a bad actor, or it's some odd application that you have in the system that's trying to do something that it's not supposed to do, or that's how it's written. But based on that, you need to come to that conclusion before you can go ahead and actually do the suppression. At the same time, you should then start thinking about, okay, as a company, one thing is, okay, it's very good to have detection capabilities, but it's also great to have your controls in place that will not allow the attackers to do this in the first place. Now, with application whitelisting and certain other group policies that you can enable in order to actually, you can't really block PowerShell, but what you can do is you can tame down the common runtime language. And when you do that, attackers can't just arbitrarily run codes on your system saying bypass or elevate privilege or execute bypass policies or IEX or running Mimikatz or PowerView on memory. And now none of those will happen anymore. It just blocks, right? Obviously, over time, I'm pretty sure there's going to be ways that attackers find out that they can still bypass that again. And it's a battle we always find. And that's a good thing. You have to keep up with what the current industry standard is. What is happening today? What is Twitter talking about today? And what is the darknet talking about today? And what is available openly what is the threat that's targeting other companies like yours or like the ones that you are providing service to. At the end of the this particular slide, obviously you will see there are two images that I've pasted, MISP and Sigma. The reason of Sigma is, if you guys don't know or not accustomed to Sigma, it's a great place. It's a GitHub repository done by Florian Roth or started by Florian Roth and a whole bunch of other community contributors. Phenomenal job that they have done. What they have done is over time, they have put together a list of pseudocodes that you can take from that repository, convert it into any platform that you are using today in your environment. May that be Elk Stack, may that be Splunk, may that be QRadar, may that be for any solution. The pseudocode is present. You need to take that pseudocode, and those pseudocodes are for detections. You take that pseudocode, and then you can use that in your environment. And obviously, there are caveats with false positives and stuff like that, which is expected that you guys will fix it over time and reduce the noise. MISP obviously is a threat sharing platform. It's not only used for sharing IOCs, but it's also heavily used for sharing the kill chain pattern. Like if a phishing happened today in your environment and you had a sandbox thing done, and now you know what else that the phishing would end up doing, that becomes part of your that BIOC, and you can share that intelligence data with the community. And what better platform to do that is actually MISP. You just upload all your findings, you upload the MITRE kill chain, you can literally upload the heat map and say, okay, if this is the attributes, then this is what expected. And you can then share that with the community. And the community might be very limited. It might be only your company. It might be other companies that you work together, and so on. Yeah, before moving forward too much, sliding scale of cybersecurity. Sliding scale of cybersecurity actually is a very important stage for your maturity of the organization that you belong to. The first phase is architecture. Architecture actually has, well, under architecture, you will have supply chain, architecting the network, maintaining the network, patching the network. And by network, I really mean not just the network level. The network, I mean the entire environment I'm talking about. And then defense in depth, putting proper controls. Now, after that comes to passive defense. Now, with passive defense, you have firewalls, you have your IPS technologies, you have your AVs, you have tuning those AVs or tuning whatever EDR solution that you have, and placement of technology. Give me a second. And after placement of technology, the most important part for enabling you to do threat hunting is the visibility and collection, which is basically the logs that you would want to collect in a centralized platform that will enable you and your team to look through those logs when you are doing hunting or when you are pulling up other records that is related to the investigation that you are currently doing. Which brings us to the active defense phase. Now, active defense starts with cyber threat hunting, incident response. NSM stands for network sensors and other toolsets that will monitor your networks. And then there is malware reverse engineering. You can either have few more features on this particular phase itself, but it's kind of out of the scope for this particular presentation. But that forms your core active defense team. Now, after the active defense team, there is intelligence team, which is your cyber threat researchers, red team emulations, which are your typical red teamers or folks in the company who understands red team. And you need to do that for your own organization on a quarterly basis at the least to understand where you stand today and how good is your defensive capabilities. Hypothesis generations, because they are all driven by threat research and other cyber threat intelligence data. Obviously, team restructuring. Now, as you work in active defense and intelligence, none of these, actually taking from architecture to the offensive side, none of these are siloed. It's not like you are working on your own, the other team just works on their own and you don't talk between each other, and that's how things won't work. And that's why the team restructuring is so important, because intelligence feeds threat hunting. Threat hunting cannot be done by logs without, well, if you are missing proper logs. Passive team cannot operate if the architecture in the first place is out of place and it's not keeping up with what's needed. So as you see, all of these are very, very related fields, and the people in these different fields may work for two different teams. Like a threat hunter can be part of an intelligence team. The intelligence team can be also part of the offensive team, and maybe sometimes they do help with AV tuning. So it's a replaceable character. Basically, it's an object that you can put, and everyone kind of feeds information to everyone else. And that's how you perform really well. But your day-to-day activities are basically driven by the columns you belong by. Going to the offensive side is where I tell companies that you need to be very careful, because the return on investment on the offensive side is actually it's ridiculously poor. Plus, it's probably illegal. Even if your counter argument is, well, I was hacking back the hacker, but sadly, the hacker probably hacked, first of all, another server somewhere that belongs not to the hacker, and you end up, if you are hacking back, you're probably not hacking back the actual attacker, you're hacking back the poor server that was already pwned by someone else. And you get into, obviously, legal litigations and other problems, which you don't want to indulge into. That being said, in recent times, we have come across some amazing work done by, all over the world, predominantly done by Microsoft, done by FBI and other groups all around the world, to bring down some notorious threat actors over the time, and which was a great thing. But as you probably also noticed, that you can bring down an infrastructure, bringing down an entire group and making a statement that will say, okay, they will never do this again, is pretty much out of the question. You can bring down the infrastructure, you can bring down the people, but the act of doing bad will keep on happening. And that's why all the fields before that offensive is that important. And you have to be living in today and not living in a year back. You need to know what's going on in your geopolitical stance, in your environment, in your company's profile, and how is your threat landscape mapping out. Okay, so that brings us to, how do you protect yourself from unknown? But let's begin. How do you even do cyber in general properly? And let me start with an example. I have come across multiple really, really big companies that have the state-of-the-art EDR tools or XDR tools, or the so-called next-gen tools. But still, their defenses are not even strong as to companies that purely has an open source centralized platform, and they have threat hunters. Now, why is that? And the answer is very simple. The answer is, tools will do what they are supposed to do, which is, if they detect you based on an IOC, which they detect you based on an behavioristic model, maybe signature-based, or maybe something else, and they're going to probably block and send an alert. So the block part is great. So that's an active response, which is great that other, the EDR companies are now starting to do, or have been doing. But where the companies fall short is, there is no one looking out for those alerts and taking action, or literally making actionable items of what can be done, and actually keeping an eye on those alerts on a regular basis. So I'll give you a pretty good example from one of the recent work that I've been doing, was noticing how companies have invested heavily on EDR solutions, and their internal SOC is always fighting for resources, and they don't have enough headcounts for actually looking into those alerts. And the problem with that is very simple. Let's say RunDLO calls something, and then RunDLO injects into another process. The process triggers an alert. You have the state-of-the-art EDR tool. The tool goes back and kills this particular process. It hasn't removed the threat actor from your machine yet. The only way you will be successfully able to do that at the right speed is when you have folks looking at those alerts, and that brings up into the investigation, and then you dive in and start investigating, okay, what has happened before the alert got triggered, what is happening after the alert has been triggered. Maybe it's time to pull the plug on the box and take the box offline and do forensics on the box, right? But if you do not do that, the attacker is just going to keep trying other methods, and you're going to keep throwing alerts. No one's going to look at it, and the attacker is going to still move ahead with their objectives. All I spoke about till now is only the 25%, which is still not done correctly in a lot of places. Let's move into that 35% space. This is where typically you will hear about user behavior analytics, big data, machine learning, sandboxing technologies, IPS and IDS technologies, and obviously some kind of a platform where you can analyze. It's a little bit more mature, and you have folks looking at alerts, looking at different events. So now let's talk about the problems first, and what this solves and what this doesn't solve. The problem again over here is knowing your log sources. Now, a lot of the companies that I've worked with or helped out before, or even today, they predominantly think that the firewall log that they generate is the truth of everything. And that's a big misconception. The firewall logs barely has any data that as a threat hunter you can use on a day-to-day basis to do justice to what you need to get done. It's not enough to only get probably a proxy source and then an endpoint that's outside your perimeter, and maybe saying what protocol and ports it was using, what application layer it did something, and then getting a ET signature or some kind of signature match on that. It's not enough. There is so much data missing from that platform instantly. That's one problem. So if you're just ingesting firewall logs in your SIM tool and you think that you are completed, very wrong conception. You need to rethink what you really need and what you really want to get into your platform. User behavior anomaly detection, right? The user behavior analytics or user behavior analytics itself is not a very simplistic task, because it's not as easy as you feeding the user information from endpoints into your platform and think that it's going to work. You need a very clean Active Directory to get started. If your Active Directory is already messed up and it's not clean, it's not organized, it's not documented properly, and your organizational units are all over the place, user behavior analytics is going to throw you hundreds of alerts a day, and you're just going to say, this is useless, I'm not going to use it. Same goes for sandboxing technologies and other machine learning technologies. Now, these technologies by themselves are phenomenal and they're awesome at what they do. But before the technologies can take over, there needs to be that symbiotic relationship where a human or a human conscious mind decides what is the right data that needs to go into this platform, how the data needs to look before it goes into that platform, and what is the information that I'm really after. You can't just expect that I'm going to send some data and some magic's going to happen and everything's going to work perfectly. So so far I've only covered, I guess, 60% of the entire 100%, which brings us to the 40% of the unknown. Now, provided you have done step 1 and 2 correctly, or you're keeping up to the speed and you're at the 90% level, because honestly speaking, you will never be at the 100% for any of the phases that I'm sharing today. It's just not possible. And if you keep trying for that 100%, you're going to miss the other 100% from the other phase. So provided you are at a mature level, maybe 85% coverage, and with that 85% coverage, now you are capable of looking at unknown. So what is unknown, right? If it's unknown, how am I talking about it? Putting it into a really simple or simplistic manner, unknown is nothing but someone trying to exploit a 0-day on your, let's just say, take for example, your Exchange servers or your IIS servers. The 0-day might not be detected, or 100% or 99% of the time will not be detected. But if you go back to some of the slides previously, I was asking you guys to concentrate on the kill chain, not just one phase itself. And the reason is very simple. Once that 0 day has done its job, the attacker is going to try to do something else. They're going to move laterally. They're going to start creating persistence. They're going to start running some discovery tasks. The moment that happens, you can now detect them. Once you have detected an act of suspicion, you might not, or you might be asking at that point, how the heck did it get started? Take the box offline. That's where your malware reverse engineers comes in. That's where your other security researchers comes in, and they reverse engineer the malware that was dropped or the RCE that was exploited, and they come up, and that's how you get, this is a 0 day. But in order for you to go do that act, you need to first know what you're looking for, which is, again, it's not about just 0 days, right? I'll share you some other details as well. Maybe this will enable you guys to think a little bit in a more scoped out fashion, which is, if your network equipment and monitoring tools are only monitoring HTTP1, what if an attack is conducted over HTTP2? You're not even monitoring it. You don't even know it happened. So you won't ever see it. Going back to another step, Google already started using QUIC as a protocol. Anything that happens in your environment over QUIC, you're not monitoring it, so you won't ever see it happening. That doesn't mean that you are safe. All it means, you just don't know you got breached. And all of those comes part of your security research team. And you need to continuously strive for moving towards that mature model as the entire industry moves towards that. So that's why, as we ended in the last slide, breach is already there. And that's how I tell my threat hunters that you start your morning by thinking, I am already breached. Let's see what I can find, and let's see if I can protect before the impact happens or action on objective happens. And places that you should put controls in or keep a keen eye on are definitely phishing. If you are moving to cloud infrastructure, your cloud infrastructure in the recent times, I've come across dozens and more on a daily basis where companies are moving to cloud, but they don't monitor cloud. So when attackers are leveraging SharePoint itself to come against your cloud environment through a phishing or whatever, using some kind of application which is cloud native, and your users are giving permission to that application, thus giving up their user details, and now the attacker has full control on their account, and it's in cloud, so you're completely blind, so you're not seeing anything until actions are now starting to happen on behalf of the user. And that's where you should focus on, and how you can minimize that and how you can monitor those environments. Same thing for your DMZ, keeping a critical eye on your DMZ environment, because that's the environment that connects you with your external perimeter, so to say. Keeping an eye on, so since the hack P is part of the dark net, are you as a researcher looking at what credentials of your users that is currently working, how many of their credentials are easily available on the darknet? And if yes, are you using that and seeing if those passwords are still being used in your environment? And if yes, go after the user, ask them to change. And that's actually part of your maturity model. Like, how matured are you today? How much you know of your own self? Because guess what? If you don't know, doesn't matter. The attacker does know, and who's going to come against you. So gathering information of your own company, external recon should be done so that you know how much of your environment is open to the public. This should be done, I would say, on a weekly basis, because every time there's a change management that's happening in your company, you should probably run this, because you never know what comes out after the change management. And if you have a dev shop that's completely segregated, keep an eye on what the heck is happening on the dev shop as well. Obviously, keeping an eye on patching, because if you're not doing that correctly, in the recent times, again, Exchange servers or even IIS containers, all of these were exploited. And if you're not keeping up to date with the patching, at least you should keep an eye on the monitoring. As I mentioned, it's not a game that who is doing it better. Everyone has to do it together. And one team will feed the data to another team as the criticality of that event becomes severe. or high. Like I'm not saying wait till it's critical and if all alarms are buzzing, only act then. I'm talking about being proactive, staying top notch at the very end case. You know what's happening in the relative sense of the general disclosed data that's out there in the world, and how well are you protected against all of those. Are you monitoring or do you have capabilities of monitoring what is your perimeter, what is your endpoint going and talking to? So putting proper controls in place, as in your perimeter firewalls, making sure that they are tweaked and audit the firewall so that there is no wrong logic causing a havoc. Like you think you have RDP blocked, but no, it's not, because whoever set up your firewall didn't set it up correctly. Obviously, keeping an eye on everything else is equally important. As I mentioned, the blue over here are the goals of an attacker perspective. Your activities that you should keep an eye are the ones in yellow. The assets are so-called your crown jewels, and you use them in order of a maturity model of scoring that, okay, if it's on this particular system, it's this much critical than if it's on an end user. Obviously, one thing I did miss was vulnerability management. I think a lot of companies are pushing towards VM, but VM is incomplete if you don't have a proper CMDB. Your CMDB is supposed to get you a know-how of how many assets you actually have. If you don't even know how many assets you have in your environment, you cannot do vulnerability management. But again, that doesn't mean that, oh, since my CMDB is not up and running, I shouldn't do VM. You should do all of these parallelly, but you can only say it's complete as all these different phases, they mature in their own way. And if they're not, someone needs to go push and make sure that it's happening on a quarterly basis. If you, I think I missed another one, sorry guys. Misconfigurations. If you're a company that's predominantly working on application, like your day-to-day work is creating softwares, are you checking your code? Are you making sure that none of those codes with a default password is up in GitHub or any other places that you have shared? Is that code going out of your company on a USB drive and then someone loses that USB drive? So all of these are things that you need to keep in mind in order to do the due diligence. Talking about the main reason for this presentation, why open source? There is enough information in the open source community that you can leverage today to get up and running in a lightning speed fashion using just open source technology and putting them into places. Now, in this particular slide, if you look from left to right, that's how the flow of the CI/CD pipeline is created. So Zeek, I don't really like the name yet. I'm still stuck with what's called the Bro, which later became Zeek. But so Bro or Zeek should be your network sensors, or you can use them as your network sensors. They typically sit in a span port where all your traffic that's going north-south out of your environment, it typically sits behind the firewall, and all your core switches feed the span traffic to your network sensor, which is probably running Zeek. On the same topic, there is Arcamine, which was also called Moloch back in the days, recently changed its name to Arcanine. And it's a great tool for packet capture. It allows you to do full packet capturing, to go back and look at that data and extract what you needed in case you are looking for an investigative and you needed that data. Going to endpoints, you have Sysmon, which is very native to Windows. You have Velociraptor and you have OS Query. Velociraptor and OS Query are more of hunting tools, whereas Sysmon is a telemetry collection tool. So Sysmon runs on your system and gives you collection, maybe 1 billion events per endpoint on a daily basis. Velociraptor and OS Query, on the other hand, I will cover these in the next couple of, hopefully I can do a demo real quick and you can see how these applications are. Velociraptor and OS Query actually does threat hunting. It allows you to do hunts based on your use cases, and you can run these queries as a pack. So it's not running every second or every millisecond. It's only running and collecting the delta from the last time. Now, all these tools put together, you can gather all these data that it's generating. You can ship them to an Amazon S3 bucket or an open source MinIO, which is also heavily used, kind of counterpart of S3. You can send the data to Apache Kafka. If you are into streaming, I think if you're not, you should move because ETL is long dead. It's all streaming nowadays. Logstash forwards the data to, or folds the data to Apache Kafka and your S3 for retention and forking the data. And then you have KSQL, which does stream-based events processing. And that can either send the data to your other Hadoop-based cluster, Jupyter Notebook. You use Jupyter Notebook to run queries on top of that, Cassandra, or Apache Spark. From Kafka, you can also forward the data to Elastic Stack. And you can, your analysts can then analyze those raw data using Kibana as a front end. At the same time, you can write multiple use cases leveraging alerting tools like Watcher, general webhooks to send an alert to other applications that you use for your alerting, or even email. Apart from both of these, two more important parts, which is Cortex and Mist. As I've talked about Mist in the previous slides, Mist is a place where you can share your data, or even you can collect data from other sharing platforms. And Cortex is there to enrich that data further more. Like maybe you want to do some specific queries against the intels that comes in. And Cortex can allow you to do that. And Cortex and Hive kind of goes hand in hand, even though they are separate platforms. Now, Hive is a place, and obviously the Hive mind, which is the threat hunters and the security folks. The Hive allows you to, it's a ticketing platform, but it goes beyond the ticketing platform. And the reason is very simple. It looks up all the hashes, the attacks, and the IOCs that you put in the ticket. It then rechecks those IOCs with other tickets. And you can track if the same adversary is coming after multiple different organizations, multiple different users in your own organization. And over time, you can keep a track of what's actually happening at a very fast speed. You can also enrich your IOCs on an instant if you have a relationship or the bonding done between Hive and Cortex. So with that, I hopefully gave you guys enough information with what you can do with open source technologies. So I spoke a lot, right? Let's try to see if we can do a demo. So for a demo, let's see, where is my browser? Okay, so we're going to start off from Velociraptor. With Velociraptor, this is your opening screen. At the moment, I am running a little older version of the Velociraptor than the latest one. In the latest one, you can go dark mode as well, which is, wow, awesome. With Velociraptor, right now I am ingesting or currently connected with two of my machines that's running in my lab environment. One's the actual domain controller, one's the workstation. What you can do is you can query these systems, and we're going to come to that querying part in just a short amount of time. So let's start from Fleet. This is how Fleet looks like. So Fleet also over here, you can see that I am ingesting, or I am connected to my two endpoints. Sorry about that, it's just refreshing. Wondering why it's taking that long. I'm guessing the demo gods are not happy with me today. We're going to come revisit the Fleet part, but let's go back to some other information that we can start off with really easy. So this screen that you are looking at right now, and it's kind of bloated up, this screen that you're looking at right now is the Kibana interface. I have a dashboard that I like using to keep an eye as to what's going on in the environment, right? Now, starting in the environment, I very easily see that all my MITRE T codes are framed over here, plus some other extra rule sets that I've written. in order to help me during my threat hunting activities. One that sticks out to me is the fact that I see protected, this particular one, context, protected mode, exit, or macro used. Now, what that actually means, right? So let's take a quick look. Let's go back to my screen. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this particular screen. What's happening over here is the fact that, okay, with that particular logic, what I'm looking at is every time someone opens up a macro enabled document, they have to click that enable macro. And the moment that happens, there is a registry entry that happens as well for that particular document. Now you can map that in your sysmon configurations. How? Let's go over here. So this is the sysmon configuration that I am using currently. And you can see over here that I am looking for any registry value set. And whenever it is containing trusted trust records, I am creating a rule for that, which is called context protected mode exiting on macro use. So that's how I'm getting this intelligent data over here. And the moment I see that, I'm like, okay, someone detonated a macro. What else were they doing? So in that time, I go back to my document because I saw the document name from here. And with that, I go back to my dashboard and I look up, okay, what the heck is going on? Can I take a quick look? Sorry, let me go back to the right machine. So very quickly, I can see that, okay, there was a user that remotely connected to this machine, and there is the IP address of that particular user as well, and the username. Apart from that, I can see a lot of the commands that were probably executed. Also, a whole bunch of files that were written on my right-hand side screen. Digging a little bit deeper, I can then see that, okay, someone wrote, even though there was a Word macro, but I see an XLS document. It's not a Word doc. So what's going on? And then I see over here that, okay, the Word document also created a whole bunch of different files like ABC. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'll try to make it a little bit more bigger. So I can see that, okay, someone ran from the Word macro, ran the ABCD doc. Also, it created a file called PDB. ABC, and it also created the XLS file, and then it also executed the run DLL lol binary to execute a PDF file. Well, what the heck's going on? And then I can see that after the run DLL ran, it basically launched calculator leveraging command shell. So what's that file, right? And that's where tools or hunting tools comes in very handy. So at that point of time, I can literally just go in over here, go over to my machine, I go directly to the VFS, interrogate, go look up my C drive. I know where the file is written, just from over here, from sysmon, it says user public. So I'm going to look over at what's going on in the public directory. Right, going over to the public directory, I can see that, okay, there's these 3 documents that were written. What are they? So at this point of time, since PDF was the name of the file, but I also see that it was executed by run DLL, which is what the heck. So I'm curious as to what's happening, right? What's going on? Without even going and retrieving the file, which I can just do over here by clicking the download item. Like I can say recollect the item. I have pre-downloaded the item just for the demo. But what's happening over here, right? I want to see what's in the actual file. So going over to the hex view, even before I start, I see MZ. Well, if it's an executable, it should not be a PDF. Something else is going on. So now, as a reverse engineer at this point of time, you can pull up this document and start working on it. If you go to the text view, let me see if I can make my screen a little bigger, and you scroll down at the very bottom, you will also come across that, hey, this is an assembly. So some kind of a .NET assembly is being used. Probably this is a DLL. Now you can use, one of your favorite reverse engineering tools like Intel Spy or iSpy or Geodra for all I care, and leverage those to see what the heck was this DLL doing. And that takes you to that cyber research phase. But the capacity of this particular tool is that the fact that you can run all these at a lightning speed and get results. Also, what you can do is you can directly just go into any of these hosts, go into shell, and you can literally run PowerShell on this machine. Now, I'm guessing something has happened on my backend. Maybe it won't work, but let's try. So I'm just going to run that. Okay, so without even actually talking to the user in the machine, before I even go to there, I can run PowerShell or I can run the VQL language to do basic queries that I need. Or even go, you have PowerShell open, so at this point of time, you can do whatever PowerShell can do and get those results back, and you can use them to your benefit for your analytics work. Sadly, I believe my Fleet server died for some reason. I cannot bring it back up at this time, but Fleet enables you to do very similar things, but in a lot faster and a more easier fashion. And you can write up packs that will allow you to get file hashes. So let's go back, and I want to show you a few things that Fleet could have done very easily. Would be going into the user public. Now over here, you see that I'm collecting the file hashes, right? But I am clicking a bunch of steps and then collecting these. But let's say I had my OS query server set up to run some packs, and the part of the pack was to monitor all temporary file shares in the endpoint and all app data local files that are written on that, and then take that data and put that into your centralized repository. Every time a binary is dropped or something like this is dropped, that hash will be generated along with the name, and you will have that in your ELK stack. And you probably will see something like this, like an MD5 right here, for that particular binary that you are looking for. And what's going to happen is you can then write a threat intel search. So if it's available openly on via SOTL or other threat intel areas, even your own MISP, that data can be enriched at a high speed, and you can leverage that data to look for clues or look for any hits. If it's already a known bad, you can automatically just use your SOAR capabilities to block that binary right off the bat. Now that takes us back to some other areas, and let's go there. So what I'm going to do this, how your endpoints, your network endpoints work, or they should be working, and how good they are during times of investigations. So all I'm going to do is basically two things. One is I'm going to just call https malware.com, general curl lookup. The other one is I'm going to just do https, right? And usually a lot of other things will happen, but let's just focus on the HTTP part and the HTTPS part. If you go back, you will see, like, I instantly see on my screen that actually from my endpoint, from where I ran the curl command, and from where it's connecting to over port 80, it also gives you the user agent. So if you are monitoring on suspicious user agent and you know that no curl command should be run in your environment, this is a very easy detection again. Obviously, there are caveats, and you always have to look for what is the detection and how much can you tame it down based on filtering or suppressions. Obviously, you get the malware, you get the URL that you was visiting, obviously the return codes and the protocol being used or the method being used. You get a lot more of data over here as well, just like the size of the body that was sent. So useful information in case of someone having just a silent keylogger in your system, they will, and let's say it's going over HTTP. This threat actor was just collecting screenshots and sending it off to the C2. Expect a body length that is more than a usual body length. And based on that, you can write, I'm highlighting response, but request and body length, both of them, they play a crucial part for you to investigate file size based on body length size that is going outbound. Now, we also did over SSL, and that brings us to, hey, what is SSL able to do? So with SSL, I can see very similar things like, yes, source and destination given, the destination port, but I can see the server name as well. Let's just say I was connecting not to the actual domain, but just the IP. It would have picked the server name that it recognized itself with. The certificate or the subject line in the certificate that it uses, JA3 and the JA3S. Now, remember from the past, I was mentioning about how JA3 and JA3S plays a very important role. So JA3 and JA3S, again, uniquely identifies this particular client communication with the malware website. And if you see, this particular string, it's the exact same, and it's going to be exact same as many number of times I do it from that particular endpoint or that particular version of the curl that I ran from that. The same curl command would allow me to get the exact same match for the exact same server. Obviously, when you are doing that, there will be DNS involved. So over here, you can see that my VM instance, they use Google DNS, and Google DNS went ahead and did an A lookup on the query and returned answers. Now, if let's just say this is not an English word again, or this is a really long query, like it's 120 characters long query, that can be again very easily based on the length or the entropy of that particular query or the answer back, because sometimes the problem is not just the query, it's how the answer backs are coming in. Let's say the query name is not A, but it's a TXT, and that's how the attackers are actually exfiltrating data. You can trigger alerts based on those conditions. Perfect. I think with that, I cover, sorry guys, I couldn't cover the so-called OS query side, but OS query is again another phenomenal tool that will allow you to actually do deeper hunt queries where you can run complex queries and tracking processes, pipes, registry entries, or just even file monitoring, as I mentioned previously, like temporary files, local files, downloads, and stuff like that. And you can go very complex. And the use case that you use is written on SQL, so you can use join and inner join statements to join multiple different tables, which is like interconnected processes with network connections, or remote ports with processes and stuff like that. So that was the demo. Hopefully you guys got a little bit of what I wanted to share, and hopefully that enables you guys to move forward and actually do your own research. Some reference that you guys can use. At the very beginning of my presentation, I showed you the heat map and I showed you the kill chain. Now all those can be created as you monitor your own environment, leveraging Vector.io. It's a great platform. It's open source, and you can use it to create and maintain your own maturity model and where your blind spots are. And it's very verbose. You can collect evidence, you can collect whatever the commands that were run and what's your detection mechanism, if there is controls in place and all that. And over time, it's going to give you a very good model of how you're progressing as a company from one stage to another. Obviously, MISP, nothing to tell more on MISP. It's a phenomenal platform. Awesome for open source community and open source sharing. Sigma, which I've already spoken about, a framework that you can use to get started, which kind of resembles something very similar to this, is called the Hive. Sorry, it's called the Helk. And with Helk, you can try out all these technologies that I'm sharing with you. And a lot of those technologies might not be existing in the Helk framework, but they're as easy as you deploying your own VM and have it up and running. Now, with that, I come to the conclusion. The main thing that I always talk about is the technology space is evolving really, really quick. We need security folks and engineers who has the aptitude and the mental capability to actually stay ahead of the game or stay up to the mark as of that day. Because if we are not doing that, we cannot keep up with the guys who are doing that. All at the same time, we need a hive mind. We all need to think alike. And we all need to share information. That's the only way cyber is going to mature over time and help you, me, spreading the news, making sure that the new generation of cyber threat hunters are way more smarter than we are, and they're way more sharper because their mentality has evolved over time, and that's what they're capable of doing at a very high speed. I personally believe also that we cannot think in just looking at logs or linked logs. It's time we start thinking in graphs, because if you do not think in graphs, you won't be able to understand where is the attacker winning and you are falling short. And by graph, I really mean the TTP as a flow slide that I was talking about, or I showed at the very beginning. That's the kind of graph I'm talking about. Even when you're analyzing how the processes are interconnected, what is the parent process, what is the child process, what is the good that connects all of these together, and all that should be in a graph fashion. And only then you can think very quickly and connect the dots that are missing. We need to bring the attacker to our level and then beat the shit out of them. It's the same thing as if someone else is coming to your house, they should not be knowing more than you know about your territory. And that stands true for your organization. You should be the one who knows the most about your organization. And the plan is when a threat actor gains access to your organization, they're going to have a lot harder time than you should have. And that's where you catch them. And then beat the shit out of them, if possible. Demand for experienced cyber threat hunters and cybersecurity engineers are always on the rise. This is a booming field. And the reason is this cyber threat hunters and engineers, it's a tough role, I'll be honest. It's not a role where you can just come out directly from a college and you can start off. You need to understand red team. You need to understand networking. You need to understand how host machines works, both Windows, Mac, Linux. You need to be very, very well versed with Linux if you want to become a cybersecurity researcher or cybersecurity engineer, because that's where all the magic happens. All the automation, they don't happen on literally a Windows system. The better you understand a Linux system, the better engineer you are. So put enough time into understanding Linux, how it works, how you can create something, how you can automate your scripts, and how it can be efficient, how you can run thousands of microservices inside one cluster or inside one server. And that's where the true finding is. Like, we are looking for those kind of folks that are very good at all of these. At the same time, the threat hunting department, you have to understand how kill chain works, how are the different binaries working, what is the problem that we are facing today when it comes to maybe adversaries reusing or evading defenses, how you can catch them while they are trying to evade the usual defenses. And how you can get started. Again, some good platform, Security Onion. You can play with Zeek, Moloch and stuff like that over there. As I mentioned, you can play with Helk. And obviously there is another version of that, which is called SoftHelk. And you can use that as well to get your game up and running and be better tomorrow. With that, I come to the end and I open the floor up for question and answers.
Okay, so now is the time for Q&A. So Security Tech, a YouTube channel, is asking, can we do the threat intel only using open source tools? How much it is effective when we compare it with the licensed tools?
Yeah, I think this is a great debatable question, right? So let me give you an answer. It may not be very a direct answer, but the answer that I usually give to all my other colleagues all over the world, right? The consumption of an intel data is two-phased. If you are only talking about a licensed vendor, they will come and tell you, yes, I have 5 million data in my database. Those are all intel. Well, great. You have that much 5 million records in your intelligence platform, out of which 3 million is 6 to 8 years old data. So the true question is that actually any use to you as part of your organization? And the answer will be no. If your vendor comes and tells you that, okay, we have TTP-based indicators, Well, good for you. Maybe you can get up and running really quick. But you can do the exact same thing with MITRE and MISP. So I leave the platform back to you. It's a thing that you need to invest based on how many security engineers you have. Because again, with a platform that you're going to maintain in-house, you have to have people who understand the technology, who understands the infrastructure, and they can maintain that platform and develop. So as long as you can do that, open source is the way to go, because you have a programmer, you can make ads that you can at a lightning speed that your vendor might be coming back in 6 months' time, and maybe not even possible by then. Again, it's not a dig to any vendors, because I think what they are trying to do is really, really good. Some of the vendors I personally know, their threat intel is amazing, and some of them do share it openly as well. But if you have missed, and it's open source data that they are sharing, why not just get that in your own environment? Plus, you can track your own investigations, which might not be present in your vendor.
The next question is from Mr. Abhiram. I want to switch my career to threat intel domain. Currently, I am on penetration testing domain. Please advise.
That I can connect to that very easily, because I used to be a systems engineer turned pen tester. Whenever I was a pen tester for open web, but I was a pen tester when an attacker would gain privilege, or an attacker would gain an initial access inside an Active Directory and an organization. So my career kind of started out as a pen test or a red teamer, and then I moved into what I do today. The move is not that tough, honestly. You just have to, like, don't take it in any other way. Move your lazy bum and get working, and build your own environments and build your own virtual environments. Create and destroy, right? And at some point, you will come to a state where you will be at a state where you say, I have enough understanding of really solving a problem. So don't start your project because you want to be in threat intel, right? You should ask the question, why should you be in threat intel? And maybe the answer is your company's not doing it correctly. Maybe the answer is that every vendor, including me, I'm not doing it correctly. And you can do it better. And if that's the answer, well, get going. Write your own code, write your own environment, create your own environment and pull data, make something out of it. And the moment you do that accurately, there's going to be a lot of people saying it's not worth it. Don't listen. If you know what the answer is, just keep at it.
The next question is from Mr. Shyam Swaroop. How can we do the intel on dark web? Can you suggest few open source tools for it?
Open source. So I'm not a huge player in the dark web. The way I do my stuff in dark web is I don't know if I should share this, but probably everyone does it. I have a lot of my own aliases that I use, and I am part of a lot of forums, and I scrape those forums. Like, I know the Onion site, I know what the site is, and I can go there and I can easily get what I need. And I have other team members helping me doing that on a daily basis. So when a credential dump happens and it gets removed on an instant basis, guess what? I am part of the forum, so I probably get my hands faster than others can. And yes, there are days where I wished I had a faster means of doing it, and I would miss the intel for some reason. But usually that's the 10%. So I don't really care about the 10% most of the time. I care about the 90% and the good that it will do for everything else.
The next question from Abhiraj is, okay, sorry. Yeah, Mr. Asik is asking, hi Dhruv, I have a quick query. In large organizations, macro functionality utilized by legit users also. So in what constraint exclude list would appear?
Well, there's a lot of ways you go about it, right? Definitely a very good question. So let's talk about macros in general, right? You can have very easy use cases where you don't even look for the ones that exact things that I showed you, because you can write your use cases based on a macro launching PowerShell, a macro launching run DLL, a macro launching VBS and then injecting into memory, or you can run macros launching command prompt that then runs PowerShell. That's one way of going about it. The other way is you can block your organizational structures based on runnability and use case of macro. So let's just say your finance team doesn't need to run macro. Why is it open? If they don't run macro, why is it open on their box? If your HR folks do not need to run macro on their machine, why is macro running in the first place? Why is macro enabled? Right? The thing that I showed you is how you, knowing that people won't do their part correctly, can still monitor what's happening. And then you go back to the team and tell that, hey, you are supposed to do this, you haven't done this, go do this.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Sudhish Kumar S. What are the top certifications associated with threat hunter?
So the top certification, I would say, if you want to get a foothold on cyber threat intelligence, personally, I'm not a huge believer in any kind of certifications. I actually will, there is a known thing in Toronto maybe, that if you are applying for a job under my wing, and you show that what your claim to fame is only an OSTP and an OSCE, I'll probably grill you harder than I would the other folks. And the reason is one thing very simple. I believe in doing than rather seeing what you have achieved academically. Because I have come across enough resumes in my lifetime where I have seen you have 32 different certifications, way more than any normal people I would see doing it. And when I start asking you the questions that is needed to do the job correctly, you have no clue at all, which surprises me a lot. But saying that, certifications are also a very good way of me knowing if you're starting out, you're fresh in the industry. I don't have a way to track how much you really know unless you have some projects that you can share. But unless that's the case with certifications, what you should focus on is what can get you started. I think personally, SANS GCTI is one of the very best courses that I have personally seen. And the reason is it's not because of the course itself. The course is taught by some of the best leaders in the industry, period. So when you go talk to them, and you're missing out if you don't talk to them, just FYI, okay? That the part of certification is not just getting that certificate itself. It's probably the most useless part of the entire course. The most useful part of the entire course is you get to one-on-one chat with these awesome people and get a one-on-one based answers out of them as to how they bettered their own career, where you can improve, how you can get started and all that. At the same time, cyber threat intelligence, you can ask them questions that you can directly get a one-on-one answers. And that's how you improve on a day-to-day basis. And that's why mentors become very important. And that's a very good place to get started. And that's, again, it's not a certification that you're going to hang in your wall, but it's what you do during those 7 days or 5 days.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Kashanati. How to fetch commands from logs and map to Mitre?
Okay. If I understand your question correctly, you're asking about what logs you want to fetch and how you can use them in the MITRE. So as I probably showed you already, let me see if I can pull up my screen again. Over here, you can start seeing that I have already mapped all my logs with the MITRE T codes, the T1101, T1023. Now these are MITRE T codes, right? Maybe I'm not sharing my screen, but those are already part of the actual dashboard that I was sharing with you. And the way you can do that is you can have a sysmon config where you have made the rules to match with the MITRE. And that's how you should start. In your sysmon config, you should have MITRE rules that define the use case. And those will be part of your logs that you collect. Now that's one way of going about it. I'm not claiming that's the best way. The other way you can is leveraging that vector. Sysmon is a telemetry based. It collects all your Windows event logs that collects PowerShell commands that you ran, the connections that your endpoint made, the process IDs, your registry keys that was written to, or your startup items and all that, right? So what you can do is as you build the vector framework out, and you have detections, you can map them to MITRE, because MITRE will tell you, are you detecting on PowerShell? If the PowerShell detection is the T code, let's just say 1021 or 1023.002. And you are saying that, okay, I can now detect because you have proof that you are detecting based on all the logs you're collecting. That's your MITRE code, and that's how you build your heat map. And again, when you do it with OS query as a delta or as a threat hunting use case, that again should be your hunt case should be based out of MITRE, not just you write something and then you try to map it with MITRE.
Okay. I think that's the end of the Q&A session. That was an insightful interaction, Mr. Majumdar. We are enlightened upon the steps, enlightened to know the steps of threat hunting, the TTPs, and how to wisely make use of open source tools for threat hunting. We are very grateful for your expertise and your valuable suggestions. On behalf of Hackpy, I extend our sincere thanks to you for being with us today. Thank you all who tuned in today. If you have any additional queries, you can reach out to Mr. Dhruv Majumdar through his LinkedIn handle or Twitter handle that he had shared in his screen. The live Tech Talk will be continued with more exciting topics. Please tune in to our social media handles to know the details. See you all again soon. Stay safe and thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.